set of rules that require that he must, and his dominion must divulge to their intended victims their plans ahead of time. Now, can we find that in Scripture? Can we find that in a definitive source? Probably not. But I think it just reflects a pattern that we see in the media. We see a pattern in politics. We see a pattern in a lot of areas. It's funny because AI is built upon the foundation of pattern recognition. But, you know, the old saying, hindsight is 20/20. And when we look back at things like this television series, The Prisoner, and we go, wow, that was so far ahead of its time. Yes, it's ahead of its time. Yes, it's telegraphing the present when it aired as well as the future. But you know what? Oftentimes when we dig a little bit deeper, sometimes a lot deeper, depending on the process of obfuscation of history and distortion of history, if we dig deeper like an archaeologist into information, and information is what we are going to talk about today as a central theme to The Prisoner, because this is what they were seeking from the character number 6, as he was numbered, Patrick McGowan. They wanted information. This is repeated in every episode. Information, information. And we've gone back and defined information in a few of our presentations, but I'll repeat it a little bit today, and then we'll move into more of the advanced discussion of information and what it really is. But when we look deeply into the origins of the information presented in a television series or in a book that is projecting the future, if you want to call it science fiction, that's fine. Many novels do this without employing science. But I think what it really is reflecting the cyclic, hence the bicycle, the cyclic nature of human behavior, of history. History repeats itself. I'll share with you a little anecdote. I think I was about 5 years old at the time. And I said to my parents one day, just kind of offhand, it really wasn't, as I recall, in any sort of contextual conversation. If a 5-year-old can have a contextual conversation, I don't know, but I think it was more a matter of I blurted something out to my parents that history repeats itself. And I remember very clearly the shock on my mother's face when she turned to my dad and said, "How in the world did he know that? I mean, I haven't even developed any history. I was only 5 years old. I was barely even learning at that point." But it is true, and you know this. And therefore, if it's cyclic, it comes back around like the wheel of a bicycle. So you can reach back in history by examining the present. And by examining the present, you can extrapolate the future from the past. Now, certainly we have the Bible as a historic document, in addition to being the Word of God and our spiritual guide and our lesson book for how to live life. But there are obviously other historical records out there, extra biblical. And much of history has been obfuscated. You know, the old pattern of behavior by the conquerors, those that are in power, they rewrite history. They tell their own story, and we're seeing that all the time. Now, we could bring in a little flavor of the Mandela effect, if you will, and we kind of did that on Sunday when we were talking about Dobie Gillis and the statue by Rodin of the thinker. Was his hand, was his palm underneath his chin or on his forehead? Well, the Mandela effect is portraying it on the forehead, and I think we all recall that it was under the chin, which makes sense because even the artist wants to present the face of the work. So What I'm saying here is that despite the fact that history's been rewritten, and we know that the Bible has had, its interpretations and translations and perhaps deletions and additions, and we know that. But through the Holy Spirit, we're given the discernment to learn what we need to learn from the Word as it exists today, no matter the translation. Not a debate I get into. It's just simply a matter of let the Holy Spirit lead you and teach you. And the rest of it sorts itself out. But there's plenty of evidence that history has not only been rewritten, but it has been deleted in many cases. I think one of the most notorious organizations in this country is the Smithsonian Institution. The Smithsonian Institute. There is so much that has been stolen and hidden away and kept from the masses, you and I, from the public, that we really don't know our history in its fullness. But God will reveal all in His own good time. So, we're talking about information, and obviously numbers represent a great deal about information itself. And we can define information in computing as bits and quantum bits known as qubits, but the binary, the ternary, and the quaternary. So basically in classical computing we're talking about bits and bytes, binary system. And in quantum computing we're talking about them, but we're calling them quantum bits, qubits for short. You guys all know this. So what we're going to talk about is not only the numbers, but we are going to talk about what information really is. And I've defined it for you in the past that when God spoke everything into existence, we brought this up on Sunday. When we talk about locality, we talk about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, we talk about the basics of quantum mechanics in terms of probabilities. And that's really the underscore to the discussion of information today. In the quantum world of quantum information, qubits, I'd like to underscore the notion of probabilities that we began to talk about on Sunday with a further discussion of that, because these are just approximations. To take all the power, to take all of the mystery, all the spookiness, to take all of the bigger than life discussions of quantum computing and quantum mechanics underlying it, we can take the wind out of those sails. We can take the power out of it. We can take the fear out of it by understanding that at best, they're guesses, they're probabilities, they're approximations for the benefit of arriving at a good enough solution. And I'll back all of this up with some articles today. But good enough solutions. Nothing is precise, whereas in the classical world, it is precision that is being sought in terms of solutions. So quantum is an approximation. It's a good enough answer. And overarching this foundation of approximation is this notion that is being pushed on the public, that it's the be-all and end-all, that quantum, just putting the label quantum on something, takes it to this rarefied, stratospheric level of being omniscient, that it knows everything, it can gather everything, and it can come up with the best answers. So I give you the foundation to their hyperbole in the upper atmosphere above our 30,000 feet that we typically cruise on patch air in order to see the big picture, to see the game board and the chess pieces. They're going above 30,000 feet into that rarefied atmosphere in which they as spirits make these proclamations that quantum will give you an answer that is the best answer. I underscore that by illustrating to you and revealing to you that it's an approximation. Their best answer is a best guess. Takes all the power out of it. Takes all the mystery out of it. It's like we said on Sunday, the little boy observing the king moving through the village, and the king had no clothes. The emperor had no clothes. And the little boy, much like me as a 5-year-old, saying that history repeats itself to my parents. The little boy, not knowing any context to his statement, simply observed and reported what he observed in an honest, non-deceitful, no agenda delivery of the information. The emperor has no clothes. We should listen to our children a little more closely, because most of the time they speak the truth about what they see, what they observe, what they detect, what they measure. Okay? Because truly the emperor in this case is quantum computing and quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And you know I've studied this enough to be able to say and to reveal to you unequivocally it's naked. And yet everyone else will say, oh, those are beautiful clothes, beautiful robes. Your tailors who are over there smirking and made a whole bunch of money off of you, smirking and deceived you and told you, Emperor, that these were the finest of linens. In fact, so fine you couldn't touch them. You couldn't see them. You couldn't feel them. You couldn't interact with your clothing because of the fineness of their quality. Apply that analogy to all the things you've been hearing, even from me, about quantum computing. And you'll see that it is quite naked. It is powerless in the face of God, in the face of God's information. It's useless. Okay? So that's my opening monologue for today. I'm going to go ahead and go through some of these slides for you. I'd like to start with 2 Samuel 24. We always like to start with our scripture. And this relates to the numbering. We're talking information in terms of numbers. But from the Bible, from 2 Samuel 24, I'll read the first verse. And again, the anger, remember this, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go, number Israel and Judah. For the king said to Joab, the king of the host, which was with him, go now through all the tribes of Israel, and from Dan even to Beersheba, and number ye the people, that I may know the number of the people. Now, you can read through the rest of 2 Samuel 24. But underscore again the anger of the Lord. Why was the Lord angry when David set out to number his people? Well, it was a matter of pride. It was a matter of pride insofar as, look at all the soldiers I have. There was a census that he was taking. David commanded his men to go out and count the number of able-bodied men that were fit for military service in Israel and in Judah. Some 800,000 in Israel and 500,000 in Judah. And if you were to factor in all of the men, women, and elderly, the women, children, and the elderly, beyond just the able-bodied men capable of military duty, you're probably looking at a number of about 1 million people. Okay? Some will say anywhere from 1 million to 5 million people, in addition to the close to or over 1 million military men. So adding them together, it might approach as much as 4 or 5 million people in the census. But the number Daniel took as representing his success, representing his power, his influence. And it resulted in his pride being elevated, his hubris, if you will. And this is what God did not want to have David experience. He didn't want David to be filled with pride, because what David failed to understand was these were God's people. These were God's creation, not David's. David didn't own these people. You know, the true definition of a leader or a king is that of a servant of the people. A leader represents the people, and a true leader is a servant of the people, not a dictator. And so the pride was welling up in David over this issue of how many people in what he considered his nation, his kingdom, and therefore were his property. So this was essentially an immoral attitude on the part of David. It also removed David's ability to see that he needed, in a humble servant role, he needed to trust in God. He needed to trust that God's plan for not only himself, but also these people of Israel and Judah, God had a plan for them. And it was for David to listen to God and follow the directions of God, the plan of God, and execute the plan of God on God's behalf. Not to go off on his own track thinking, well, I own all these people. I've got this army, this 1 million+ man army, and I can go off and do whatever I want with humanity. So it's twofold. It's the pride of David, and then it is not trusting in God. And the sin was not trusting in God and his plan. So that was David's coalescence. That was a downfall, and there was a penalty for that. Okay? David was responsible for making decisions for these people as the leader. And his decision-making needed to be based upon his trust in God, his listening to God, to following the path of God that he had set forth. So the act of counting actually was a sin that resulted in his pride. Okay? So just give me a moment. I need to check a message coming through. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep saying Daniel because I've referred to Daniel so many times about the book of Daniel. Yes, it's King David. Thank you. Let me read the title of what I'm skimming through here. It's What's So Sinful About a Census, and Why Did Israel Get Punished for Something David Did? All I need to do is read my own notes, but sometimes I can't even read. So I apologize. Thank you. I was corrected. It was King David. What I'd like to use this in, and of course David was punished for this. He was given the choice of 3 punishments by God. God offered David the choice of a 3-year famine or 3 months of military fighting from Israel's enemies, or 3 days of pestilence, and David chose the 3 days of pestilence, figuring it was better to fall by God's hand than an enemy's. As a result of David's counting and his pride and his deviation from God's plan, the result of David's sin was 70,000 of his own people died. He was responsible for them as their leader. He's supposed to protect them. He's supposed to serve them. So how does this relate to, our typical discussions of quantum this and quantum that, and we're talking about King David. Okay? Oh, okay. Boy, I'm really off track here today, looking at my notes. That's what happens when you don't have a producer and you're trying to do everything yourself. He let God make the decision. David did. David made the decision, or allowed, I shouldn't say allowed, but God offered David the choice of a 3-year famine, etc., etc., and God made the choice. God came up with the 3 punishments, okay? But according to this article, God offered David those 3 choices of punishment. And according to the article, it says David chose the 3 days of pestilence. Now, I may be subject to interpretation whether he chose or God simply said this is what. But they were 3 horrible choices. But that's what judgment's all about. Okay, so moving on. When we talk about numbers, whether we're talking classical computing or quantum computing, but numbers in general, it may sound odd, but I'm going to say it anyway. Are numbers themselves sinful? Another way of putting that is, do numbers represent a sinful act? Both historical, present time, and future act. Do numbers represent sin? This is one way of saying it. Let me just let you think about that for just a moment. While I put this image up here of DNA. This is an 8-letter DNA. Okay? Normal DNA has 4 letters. And I'm going to elaborate on this in just a moment. I'm kind of setting the scene here. Okay. Think about 8-letter DNA. We'll come back to the 4 letters of DNA. There's actually, last year, they came up with a 6-letter DNA. I'm not talking more than 2 strands. We're not talking more than the double helix. We are talking about just the double helix and its composition of ribosomes, now numbering 8. So here on the screen, I put up for you the infinity symbol, which is an 8 laid horizontally. And you're all familiar with that. But I'm going to elaborate on this symbol when we talk about numbers and our numbers representing sin. If we look at the example of King David and the numbers represented or contained within a census, they were sinful. The act of counting violated God's directive not to count because it resulted in pride and misuse of his numbers of people, the misuse of his army. If King David had simply said, I'll trust God that whatever campaign he wants me to engage my troops in, God's troops in, I'll trust God's plan. Remember we talked about on Sunday, we briefly mentioned Elisha and Elijah. And Elijah, his servant, was afraid that they were surrounded. And Elijah was able to call upon the angels to reveal themselves in the 10,000 of fiery chariots of fire. And they were able to defeat their enemy because they trusted in God's numbers. So it isn't just the visible physical that we put trust in. Not knowing the numbers of our troops, but trusting spiritually in the unseen numbers of God's angels. That's the carryover message from Sunday's live stream. You see, I often repeat this. You cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. Can't separate the physical from the spiritual. When I'm saying that, it's not just in relation to quantum particles and energy fields and states of matter, but I'm saying that there's an unseen realm, and you're well aware of this, that we have to trust that God is managing that unseen realm. While we, as physical, incarnate, mortal humans, spiritual entities in human form, we have to trust that God is taking care of the spiritual. We don't put our trust in the physical, as King David did. We put our trust in God. Think about just this number. The number of angels in heaven divided into thirds. 2/3 that remained with God and 1/3 that sided with Lucifer. It's not hard to figure out who the winner is going to be when the battle takes place, the final battle. Just simply 2/3 versus 1/3. Now, we don't know the definitive number. We don't know if that's trillions or billions or millions. We don't know. We just have to trust that 2/3 is bigger than 1/3.
Witness my genius.
Now, that's some simple mathematics. But it's practical because it reinforces for us that we can trust in God, that He has those chariots of fire surrounding our enemies. So on the screen, I'm sharing with you something from mathematics and from physics that is known as the Hilbert space. And this has direct correspondence to quantum computing. I won't get too deep into this. We have a lot to cover, but I'm giving you the essential touch points that you can then make note of and go off and do your own deeper reading on if you have that interest. But the Hilbert space is how artificial intelligence operates today. When scientists will say they're not sure how the AI is functioning, they're lying to you, in the sense that they don't know how the basic process began of AI learning. It began with the Hilbert space. Okay? So what is this space? Well, it's a way to represent numbers in a geometric space, in a geometric form. This is employed in classical computing, in statistical analysis. It's also applied in quantum computing. In quantum computing, there's an evolution of this block, this cube, to something that is called the block sphere or the block globe, that represents vectors, which is basically a line that has momentum, indicated as an arrow, as a line with an arrowhead, indicating momentum and direction of travel within the contents of a globe. But here we're talking about something a little bit simpler to explain, and that is what you're seeing on the screen is one string. It's one thread. I'm not talking string theory here. I'm just saying one continuous thread, one continuous line is represented here. So I give you a simple representation here in the middle of these lines that are continuous, and then they become more complex. It's kind of like one of those mazes that are printed in books or in the newspaper and in kids' storybooks, and you take your finger and put it on the paper, on the page, and trace all the way around through the maze. It's exactly like that. The line can move X, Y, and Z, the Euclidean Cartesian coordinate system, okay, of height, width, and breadth. Okay? That's what this is illustrating, is a three-dimensional space. And this is done with numbers, statistically. And this is how numbers logically progress in a three-dimensional representation, specifically in a quantum computer. Through an AI, it functions in a three-dimensional space. The way it thinks is in 3D. The way that a classical computer thinks typically is a linear, two-dimensional logical progression. I'm simplifying greatly here. But just so it's an easy comparative analysis, think of classical computing as 2D and quantum as 3D. Okay? Now, what does this have to do with the infinity symbol? Well, let's go to 30,000 feet. Let's look at the context of what we're talking about here. The infinity symbol is used in the occult. It is used in those mystery societies. It is used in the New Age to represent infinity. So it has a direct replication to an application to the Hilbert space because it is representing three-dimensionally, it is representing infinity. If you will, that space is representing multiple dimensions in a more simplified way of illustrating dimensions. Okay? Here's the 30,000 foot perspective. I was just checking the chat room, see what you guys are doing. The infinity symbol is not God's symbol. God's symbol is the alpha and the omega in a circle. So take this infinity symbol, the 8, and untwist it in your mind. And you will have a black circle on a white background instead of this twisted circle which forms an 8. This gets into the philosophical discussion, but it also is absolutely mathematically applicable to what we're talking about, and that is defining the infinite, applying the infinite. So why is what I'm about to launch into even relevant to your everyday life? It's relevant because your reality is being revised, the title of my third book. Reality is being distorted through quantum computing. Classical computing plays its role, but they are trying to push on us psychologically in a paradigm-changing process of propaganda. The propaganda is based upon quantum computing is the be-all and the end-all. It will solve all problems. That's the propaganda. That's what's relevant to your life, is the propaganda that quantum computing will take care of everything. Trust the emperor with no clothes, is what they're telling us. I try to make this relevant, try to make this tangible, try to make this usable for you in your everyday thought process, which we started discussing on Sunday, was how we think critically, how we use our prefrontal cortex to think with our cognition, to think about how we think. Because if we understand how we think, then we can push away propaganda. Because we're thinking critically, we're thinking independently, we are thinking for ourselves, we are not trusting sources, we are not trusting what people are pushing at us. But we say, whoa, I'm going to look at this for myself before I reach a conclusion, before I make a decision, before I take my million-man army like David and try to run off and do something. Because of his own ego and hubris, he thought he could accomplish great things with a huge army, independent of what God's plan was for him and his people. That's what's relevant to us. We have people coming at us, telling us that technology will solve all the world's problems. Trust science. Trust the new religion of science. Trust the new one world religion of science. Now, you know that I study science, so when I talk to you this way and say, don't trust science, it's because I understand the origins of science. This is modern day alchemy. Don't trust it. This is the science of the craft. Don't trust it. This is the science of the sand. Don't trust it. Know its origins, which is from the enemy. The enemy is represented by this figure 8 of infinity. Ye shall be as gods. Immortality. This is what the New Agers are pushing. This is what the Ray Kurzweils of the world are pushing. This is what the Dr. Craig Venter are pushing. And many, many more like this. That you can achieve immortality. That's taking the circle of God, which is an endless circle, which is the Alpha and Omega, repeating history like the bicycle wheel rotating, that continuously, without end, God exists and his creation exists to the infinite. So let me take you full circle to the infinite. In Genesis, God spoke everything into existence, and we called that information, represented as his speaking, his projecting of energy, which then reduces in its amplitude, in its energy configuration to what we consider to be matter, to particles, energy converting to particles, to matter. The question in the infinite, bearing that speaking everything into existence, is, does that necessarily mean, as the 5-year-old boy watching the emperor, and the 5-year-old innocent boy only knowing enough to speak the truth, he asked the question of God. The 5-year-old boy asked the question of God.
Move, get out of there.
Well, God, if you spoke something into existence, what was there before you spoke everything into existence? If you say there's a starting point at which you spoke everything into existence,
Yes.
Does that not mean, God, that that's a starting point, and that because it's a starting point, there necessarily needs to be something before the starting point, something that approached the starting point, like a runner in Chariots of Fire, approaching the starting line on the track, waiting for the sound of the gun, the Big Bang. The runner assumes his position in the starting blocks, crouched down, ready to compete, ready to launch down the racetrack and expand around the racetrack at the sound of the Big Bang. But the runner had to walk, God, the runner had to walk up to the starting line and prepare himself in the starting blocks before the sound of the Big Bang. So, where did the runner come from? And God simply says to the 5-year-old boy, you're a boy. You don't have the mind of God. You don't have my mind. You only have the human mind that I created and gave you. Therefore, you are not capable of understanding the answer to that question. Your human mind is incapable of taking in the information of God. To understand what there was in existence prior to the start of the universe, that your human mind does have a rudimentary capability of understanding. Hence the beginning of science. Philosophers like Aristotle and Plato, and moving into people like Newton and Copernicus and Kepler, and moving up to the modern day scientists, they want to tell you that there's no infinite predating the starting of the universe. They want to tell you that there's a finite starting point And thus, as the universe in their model is expanding, that there is a finite end to the universe. So look at the symbol here of the figure 8, the figure of the infinite. This is the twisting of God's circle, his alpha and omega continuously turning like the bicycle wheel in The Prisoner, and twisting it into a figure 8 to deceive man into believing that there is a beginning and an end. That in science you can discover the beginning and you can discover the end of the universe, of all creation. And science will use a number system to do that. So at the intersection, the crossing point of the twisting of the circle is 0. To the left of 0 is -1. To the right of 0 is +1. That is called balance ternary, which we've explained over and over again and applied it in different examples for you. Today I'm providing you balance ternary in the example of the infinity, because it's illustrating the movements of Satan. It is illustrating the numbering system that is sinful. It's sinful because the nature of what it prescribes is sinful. Balance ternary describes the movements of Satan. He starts at 0. He goes to +1. He retraces back to 0. Then he goes to -1. And then he retraces back to 0. And he continues this endless loop of the infinity symbol. And here's the deception. He's trying to tell us, in the example of quantum computing, that it can be everywhere and it can be all-knowing. And yet it is only 0. Because balance ternary sums, the sum total of balance ternary, 0, -1, and +1 is always 0. He always returns in his movements to 0, to the starting point. And so he says that it is finite because he is trapped in a infinite loop. His prison, where he is trapped, his world,
you've got the reins,
and his third of the fallen angels, the third of the angels that are now fallen, likewise are trapped in this figure 8 endless loop. And he tries through the propaganda to tell you this is all there is. This is the universe. We measure it, we detect it, we measure it, we run experiments, but it always comes back to 0. But he won't tell people that it's 0. He will say it's infinite, but it is only infinite within the trap that he's in.
You there. Come with
You see, Satan's already imprisoned by God because of his sin. And therefore, he can't break out of this. If you look to the right on the screen, to the Hilbert space here, this is Satan trying to say this is the universe. I'm describing in quantum mechanics the universe to you in this space, and it's a cube. And it's endless, because if you start at the starting point and trace this all along, it will continue infinitely.
advance.
But that's because he has the mind that humans have. Satan has, in his human form, in his being imprisoned in our reality, taken out of heaven and placed in our reality, he is trapped in that cube. And just like the infinity symbol, he continues to move, but he doesn't get anywhere. He's still trapped in that paradigm. He's still trapped in that environment. He can't move beyond this Hilbert space. Yet his propaganda will tell humans there are 2 to the 500 power of parallel dimensions. There are 2 to the 2000th power in today's quantum computing from D-Wave, 2 to the 2000th power of parallel dimensions that they're accessing. Well, that may be all well and good, and there may be more than 2 to the 2000th power of parallel dimensions that they claim in quantum computing that they are accessing. But all it is subdividing this cube into smaller and smaller divisions that they call parallel dimensions. You see, by the figure 8 of the infinite, which is Satan's symbol, okay? That is the New Age symbol. That's the dark arts symbol that they push through their propaganda on humanity. They are trapped in that. They can't move beyond it because God is always in his mind of God, in his infinite wisdom, in his infinite source of information. He's always moving well ahead of Satan. Satan tries to break out, tries to go in new directions, but all he does is continue to subdivide the cube, as I'm illustrating here with the Hilbert space. And Hilbert space is what comprises quantum computing. And as I said before, the globe, the block globe here is also representing those multiples of parallel dimensions, explaining and providing a graphical representation of the statistical, stochastic, Boltzmann machine mathematics that are employed in quantum computing. They're still trapped and always will be trapped, never able to exceed beyond. So going back to what I said about the infinite, we do not have the capability with the human mind to definitively understand the infinite before the starting line in the movie Chariots of Fire with the runners. We can't understand the infinite before the start of everything, nor can we understand the infinite as the universe, spoken into existence by God, continues to replicate. Okay? It's replicating, thus expanding. It is multiplication through division. That is replication. We don't know the infinite as to how large the universe is. Because if it's growing in our limited capability of quantum mechanics, we observe the universe, we detect it, we measure it, and we think we have a number that tells us how big the universe is. Well, let's be the little boy, 5-year-old boy, talking to the scientist, not God this time, but talking to the scientist, and saying, okay, Mr. Astrophysicist, I want you to tell me how big the universe is. And so the astrobiologist and the astrophysicist and the cosmologist, these guys, he's talking to a group of these guys, okay, because they all have their specialties. They're all compartmentalized. And the little boy says, you guys, you're the experts, give me a number. So they give usually varying numbers because they all have their own interpretation of the universe. And he takes in their numbers. Let's say there's 5 numbers that are provided to him by 5 different scientists. First reaction by the little boy is, you guys can't agree on anything. Why is that? And they all say, well, because it's based on probabilities. And the little boy laughs and says, boy, I wish I could do that in school. I'd get A's on everything. But my teachers only accept definitive answers. It's pretty good for a 5-year-old. So the 5 scientists kind of gather together and come up with one number. They can sort of agree. This is their propaganda. So they throw a number out and say, this is how big the universe is. And it's got all these zeros. You know, it's 2 to the 2000th power. That's 2,000 zeros. It's a pretty big number. I'm just throwing that out because I used that number earlier. And the little boy says, okay, I accept your number. I accept that you are saying the universe is finite. Is that right? And they go, well, no, it's infinite. Well, wait a second, scientist. You just told me that there's a number that tells me how big the universe is. Does that mean your number's always changing? And they nod their heads, the 5 scientists, and they nod their heads, and they go, yeah, because our numbers are probabilistic. It's a Boltzmann machine. It's stochastic random number generation. See, they try to dazzle and bamboozle the little 5-year-old boy with all these terms. And the little boy, he just shrugs them off, and he laughs at him, and he says, again, I wish I could give answers like that in school, but I can't. I have to have a definitive answer. So I'm going to give you a definitive conclusion, scientist, little 5-year-old boy, very smart little precocious little dude. And he says, I'll accept your number, but logically speaking, if you give me a number that defines how big the universe is, that means there's an edge to the universe. There's a limit to the universe. There's an endpoint to the universe. I think of it like my little basketball that I play with, and the outside of the ball is the outside edges of the outside surface of the universe. So he's bouncing his little basketball, annoying the 5 scientists. And he says, your number's on the surface of this basketball. Is that right? And they have to grudgingly agree, yeah, it is. That defines the size of the universe. So he holds up the little basketball in his hand and he says, so this is the size of the universe, my basketball. And they go, yeah. He says, well, then what's beyond it? What's bigger than the number you gave me? What's beyond the surface, the edge of this
I'm with you.
basketball? What's beyond that?
Did you know there's a ruin beneath
And the scientists, looking down at their feet, kind of shuffling their feet back and forth and nervously looking at each other with side glances. They have to admit they don't know. And the little boy starts to laugh. Quietly to himself, and then a little more boisterously. And pretty soon he's nearly hysterical, laughing in the face of these scientists. And he's pointing his finger at them. And he says, the emperor has no clothes. So that's my little storytelling for the day, but I hope it illustrates the point here. We have a lot more to cover, by the way, but the point here is that the propaganda is the figure 8. It's not the circle of God. Okay? Don't believe these guys when they tell you that they can define the infinite by using an infinite symbol. That's a recursive process. It folds back on itself and always results in 0. When we talk about recursive neural network, AI programming and AI learning, AI is trapped within that figure 8 system. It is trapped within this Hilbert space. When you think about AI, when they push the propaganda that AI will do everything better than a human, remember the Hilbert space cube. They're trapped in their own black cube. AI is trapped in the cube. That's perhaps, and I'll throw this out, I'm kind of like the little 5-year-old boy again. When he says to the scientists, is that why D-Wave's computer is in a black cube? Because it's trapped in the Hilbert space cube? Is that why D-Wave talks about 2 to the 5,000th power, and now I'm saying the 2 to the 2,000th power of parallel dimensions that they're supposedly accessing? Isn't that all just happening inside that black cube? Isn't that just happening inside of Hilbert space in mathematics? And the scientists, they're astonished because this little 5-year-old knows as much as they do. He's calling them. He's calling them out using their own words. and saying, you guys have no clothes. I can see it, and I'm only 5 years old. Now, the rest of the adults that have gathered around to watch the 5 scientists talking to the 5-year-old boy, the rest of the adults, meaning humanity, the public at large, watching this exchange going on, they're astonished because they've been led to believe that the scientists are the priesthood of the religion of science today. And therefore, whatever the priests say must be correct. Because the priests don't lie in our religion of science. They always tell us the truth. They tell us that quantum can do everything. It can access all of the probable solutions at once and arrive at an answer. And when they give us, those priests give us that answer from their holy of holies, the black cube quantum computer, from their holy of holies, from the quantum chipset, with the identical architectural design of the temple, and the center point where the action takes place in the cubic chipset is science's version of the holy of holies from the temple. And they tell us whatever comes out of that holy of holies in the form of qubits is the definitive answer. And you, as the public who don't know anything about quantum, just need to trust us that we're giving you the correct answer. And the general public kind of mumbles to themselves, and like the scientist, looks down at their feet and says, yeah, I don't really know what all this quantum stuff is. It just makes my eyes glaze over when I hear the word quantum. So as a result, they just take the word of the priesthood scientists. And those same priesthood scientists could not give a definitive answer to the questions posed by the 5-year-old boy, who then laughed hysterically and pointed his finger at them while holding his basketball and said, you guys have no clothes. And the shocked public watching this, they're not mad at the scientists, they're mad at the little boy, because the little boy was speaking the truth. A truth that they couldn't admit to themselves, amongst themselves as the public, nor a truth that they could admit to the scientists, because if they questioned the scientists, they would be fearful of retribution of the actions by the scientists against the public. And yet there's only 5 of them, and the public numbers in the billions. And why is it that there can be that kind of command and control by a very small group of people over a very large group of people? It is because they use propaganda to deceive the masses into believing the lie. And in believing the lie, they have been psychologically manipulated and thus can be psychologically controlled by the very small over the very large. And it is because it is fear-based management that the very large group of people does not turn against the very small, who in fact have no armor on and are defenseless in the face of the very large number who could easily overwhelm them and defeat them if they only trusted in God, if they only trusted that there are the 10,000 fiery chariots of fire surrounding the small number of the enemy, that they put their trust not in their numbers of their multitude, but put their trust in God and the plan of God, and put their trust in the mind of God, which is truly infinite and is Alpha and Omega, circular, never ending. God operates outside of time. Humans are trapped in time, and so is Lucifer in the Hilbert space representation. of time as the fourth dimension. All right, let me stop for a moment here, check my notes coming in. Okay, all right. Let's check the chat room, see how you guys are doing. Okay. Well, I hope you're enjoying story time today. Let's go on to something else. This is all germane, it all fits together. Let's go on to this. Information labeling fits into Daniel's counting. So information labeling is important to understand because we are talking about their system of defining reality. Okay, I need to open up another set of notes. When we talk about labeling in artificial intelligence, in the training, in the machine learning discussion, how AI learns, we'll get into that a little bit, but why is it that we should even think about how AI is learning? Why is it relevant to us? Because you know as well as I do that AI is being pushed on humanity to supplant and displace humanity. This goes beyond just talking about loss of jobs. It goes beyond redefining how we spend our time. This goes to the presentation by those in AI that will say that AI will do everything better than a human. This is the elimination of humans from this reality. That's why it is important for you to understand how AI operates. We don't have to get super technical about it, but it does have spiritual connotations because AI is driven by a spiritual agenda, an evil spiritual agenda with its roots in the mystery black arts. You can't change the DNA of technology when its DNA comes from the side of the evil one. And we see that technology is being applied to eliminate the humans. Therefore, it's revealing its dark entities and origins and ideology. Its application shows its DNA. So if the application of AI is being used to do everything better than a human, it's not there to be a servant of humans, because AI is self-learning, and AI is moving to the direction of sentient self-awareness, realizing that humans are inferior. The nightmare of every science fiction movie on that topic. Okay? So that's why it's relevant to us. So let's define labeled. Good old Wikipedia. Nice simple explanations. Labeled data is a group of samples that have been tagged with one or more labels. Labeling typically takes a set of unlabeled data and augments each piece of that unlabeled data with meaningful tags that are informative. Okay, so that's easy. We understand that. Put a label on something. Okay? That way we can understand what it is.
We are immortal fools.
We're talking about labeling data. And there is something known as unlabeled data. Now, readers of Entangled magazine, you know that last year I spent quite a bit of time talking about labeled and unlabeled data and AI learning. So if you want to refresh your memory on the details of that, just go back through Entangled magazine. Thinking back about September, July or September, if I recall. But let's go into unlabeled data, because unlabeled data is really the issue that we want to focus on. How do you make use of something that is not identified? How do you employ unlabeled data in machine learning? How can it learn from something that is not identified? Well, I have an answer for you there. It's called autoencoding. An autoencoder Now, if you have an opportunity, go to sanctuary.ai. Go to sanctuary.ai and you will see in their gallery of pictures a series of pictures that if you scroll down through, you will see an image of the guys working at sanctuary.ai who are building these synthetic life forms that they claim will be indistinguishable from humans, as an image of Geordie Rose in front of an autoencoder. So I just found it in my folder of pictures. I'm going to go ahead and post that into our live stream here because I'd like to show his picture again. He showed my picture in a presentation that he did to Tech Vancouver, trying to make fun of me and discussing the relevant connection between the Mandela effect and his quantum computers at D-Wave. I call the Mandela effect quantum pollution. Anyway, so here's a picture of Dr. Rose at sanctuary.ai. It says at the top of this, I assume it's a PowerPoint presentation, fully connected winner-take-all autoencoder. All right, so I'm going to make this relevant. Here they're talking about how they're programming the artificial intelligence that is employed in their synthetic life forms. Don't be fooled by the nuts and bolts robots that you're seeing on the desk. Their synthetic life form has nothing to do with nuts and bolts robotics. It has everything to do with what we discussed in the January and February issues of Entangled. And in fact, I think October last year, I devoted a whole issue to defining the biological origin of synthetic life forms that they're producing, that they claim will be indistinguishable because they're biological, they're not nuts and bolts. So, fully encoded winner-take-all autoencoder. What this means is that the autoencoder, the auto portion is automatic. The coder means that it is labeling. It is taking in data, both labeled and unlabeled, for the purpose of applying that data to train the artificially intelligent system. What it is doing is automatically, with no humans involved, it is applying labels to the data so that the machine can make sense of that data. Let me give you a tangible example.
Yeah.
In the elementary,
I'd say, like,
adolescent stages
I don't know,
of
man.
machine learning.
It's been so long
The
since I
machine
tanked
learns
that I don't have the
through
right gear right now.
It learns
I'm supposed to have turning
image
tide on and shit.
recognition, facial recognition, object recognition. So what you do is you take very
Fucking up
simple objects
taunts.
that are already labeled, that everybody agrees, for example, this cat with black and white spots on it.
I don't agree
Is a
with this
cat
guy
with
when he
black
talks
and
about the
white spots
Mandela
on it.
effect. I believe
Humans
Mandela
have
effect
labels.
is just people
You present
misremembering
that to the
stuff.
AI who observes it,
That's just my opinion.
detects it more specifically.
But I like this guy's views on spirituality in terms of
the pixels in the picture.
relating spirituality to
Pixels.
technology.
And the human tells the machine
Specifically
that's a cat with
Christianity.
black and white dots on it.
I don't even know what this does.
And of course, there's a pattern to the dots. The machine
Taunt,
learns that.
taunt.
Now what they do,
Turn him away.
as the machine repeats this with many samples of labeled data, many images of cats, it begins to
Yeah, this is not the optimal
understand
tank,
how
bro.
to quickly recognize patterns that result in the identification of different types of cats. So now
He's
here
gonna start
come
breaking walls.
images of dogs presented to the same machine, and it recognizes that's not a cat, but it doesn't know
That's
what
not
to
a cat.
label it with.
Ah,
It doesn't have a recursive learning process that can tell it that that's a dog, not a cat. So a system of programming is employed in which many samples are presented to this
Yeah,
machine.
Scott.
It already now has a basic
Iron
understanding of how to
Color
process
nerd.
data,
Someone's looking
how
for.
to sort through it, how to categorize it, and how to recognize the patterns of that data that results in a
No
solution,
daggers.
meaning a specific type of cat.
No daggers here.
The way to accelerate that is this winner-take-all system. This is called adversarial neural network programming.
Long live Jarl Sturo.
Hence the name
Who needs Pillar of
adversarial
Thurn?
itself we need to focus on.
Color nerd.
Because
Color
this is where it
third.
becomes relevant to you and I as humans, set to be displaced
I should
by
have
AI,
turning tide on instead of.
both in the biological
pearlescent.
synthetic life forms and the AI system that operates the life form as a synthetic
Pillar.
brain, the AI brain. This
I
is
got
where it
one
becomes
piece pillar.
relevant to you and I, as humans that humans seek to displace. Talk about a new definition of insanity. Humans that are set on a path to replace humanity. Is that not insane? So,
I gotta switch around some
autoencoder,
stuff.
winner take all, means adversarial recursive neural network programming. The adversarial is this, and I presented this almost 2 years ago on the radio and in Entangled magazine.
This is old stuff, man. This is like 2020,
Robots, not
2019
robots.
streams.
They
They've
talk
advanced so
to
much in quantum
each other.
computer
This is actually
and
done.
AI.
This is not my storyline.
I'd love to get his take, but he went private on Subscribestar, so I don't really feel like paying for his thing.
Winner take all. Adversarial learning. The adversarial
He was sued after the whole COVID stuff. And went totally private. Why do we have so many treasure maps?
of each individual AI in this pairing on was such that there is no compromise. There is no collaboration. There is no
Choking Talons.
win-win for both
That's pretty
sides.
good.
There's no give and take. There's winner take all. Meaning that it was a battle.
I just tank
to the
normal,
death.
man. I can't.
Battle to the defeat
I can tank
of
the
opponent. To give no
base
quarter
dungeon vets,
to
but I can't
the
tank
opponent.
DLC ones. That suck.
This goes beyond out the go.
I'm mostly a healer,
This is not a board
DPS.
game. This is winner take all, which means fight to the death. Literally, it is called in
Banished
programming,
City
adversarial programming.
Banished
I don't need to
City.
make this up. I just report the facts to you.
Banished City Graven.
Now, in the
Banished
discussion of labeling and unlabeled and labeled
City.
unlabeled data, the
Definitely
machine
Graven.
will continue to
Normal,
process
man.
the
Fuck that.
unlabeled data until it arrives at a solution, until it is able to accurately label the
Fuck all
data
that shit.
itself. Auto-encoding.
Yeah,
is
we're having a
labeling the
good
data
one.
itself with
This guy's
no
really interesting.
human input.
Him, Mark
The
Passio.
AI discovers that the new series of images are all images of dogs and continues through this process of auto-encoding until it comes up with the definitive
Oh, shit, man.
label for each type of dog that is presented to it. And no human was involved in shifting it from understanding how to label cats over to how to label and identify cats, or dogs. Completely new realm. Moved completely away from cats over to dogs. On its own. And this is why there's this image I'm showing you of Dr. Jordy Rose from D-Wave, who founded Sanctuary, where they're building these synthetics, using a winner-take-all mindset for the AI.
This dungeon?
That's why it's relevant to you and I.
Well,
Because
this one's pretty
is
easy.
the insane direction.
Except getting hard mode in the end, where you got to. I think you got to keep
Never for a moment should you forget that this is winner take all programming. If you want
You gotta
talk
keep
about
3 Daedra
dystopia,
alive.
if you want to talk
Most
about
people
science fiction, if you want to go
don't
that
really
direction,
do it.
in order to understand the context of this from 30,000 feet, that's okay, because it is relevant to the direction that these people are taking humanity. It is not benevolent because its origins are malevolent.
We're not doing a lot of
The origins of the
damage.
mathematics resulting in winner-take-all encoding is from the enemy. We've demonstrated the origins to you. Now look at the outcome of the origins. Apply the fruits of their mindset. Apply the fruits of their knowledge. Apply the fruits to see the origins and the agenda.
Can I use this?
Why would you program a machine in a winner-take-all adversarial fashion if it was meant for benevolent purposes? Winner-take-all is malevolent, plain and simple. Now, it's easy for someone in programming, a scientist, to hear what I'm saying and say, you're missing the point. You don't understand this. Auto-encoding means we can take in more and more information without humans being involved. We can speed up the process of labeling. That's point one I would agree with. Let's go to the next one.
I don't even know if this is bad.
The argument is that
Should
it
be.
is
I'm just doing
dependent upon
what's
this
it called?
winner-take-all, this adversarial
Pledges, I guess.
governance to reach a definitive answer. Because
Do some pledges.
with a definitive answer,
I wanna do
we're able to
solstice dailies, but I gotta find a
accurately
group.
identify that dog. Point number two, I would agree with. But here's the point to the counterpoint from the scientists, and that is,
Damn it, taunt,
why
taunt, taunt.
then, Mr. Science, are you talking about
Ah.
replacing humans with synthetic life forms that are indistinguishable from humans and have a mind that can do everything better than a human? Why are you doing that? Because by the very nature of the programming, it will view humans as consisting of a lower life form biologically and a mind that is subservient to the mind of the AI's capabilities. Therefore, the definition of malevolency applies to your application of your science.
Holy shit.
We just use pure logic here as a 5-year-old looking at what they're doing. We look at their science, we look at their math, we look at their programming, we look at their advances in biology, we listen to their own statements, their own proclamations and pronouncements and projections as to the future, and they talk about singularity, uploading our minds into a machine. That is not benevolent to the human race. So let's kind of step way back for a moment here, and let's talk again about word association, infinite and immortality. And I will, as the 5-year-old boy, ask you, the audience, this question for the purpose of your critical thinking. The question is this: if given the opportunity to achieve immortality, would you take it? As we always do here, we define our terms, so let's define immortality. 2 types of immortality I will offer to you. There's immortality offered by the enemy, and there is immortality
This is good
offered
to not have a healer, really. Or just have like a healer that does DPS too.
Sacrifice. Which is your choice?
Even fake tanks can run this pretty much.
When given that
It's like the
choice,
power creep going on.
black or white? Would you take
You
the
fucking
white
solo
as
this
God
better,
offers
probably.
his form of immortality? Or would you take the black, which is the immortality as offered and defined by Satan? I will define Satan's in the context of the scientific discussion. His immortality is the singularity, the uploading of our minds into a computer. We know from the Word of God, from our learning, from the teachings from the Word of God, what God's version of immortality is. That's the choice we have as humans to make.
The end though? Yeah,
I
the end.
mentioned
Yeah.
this briefly on Sunday. The pastor,
It's probably gonna be a
Kathleen, and
bitch.
I pay some attention
If we're doing
to.
HM, I don't know if they want to do HM or
He
what.
has some good teachings, so we pay attention. But he made the offhanded comment that really kind of took me aback for a moment. That you don't need to study quantum mechanics and quantum physics in order to be saved. And that's almost verbatim to what he said. And I would agree to a limited degree with him.
I gotta
you don't need to know anything about quantum science.
keep the Daedra away from everybody.
Particle physics. You don't need to know any of this stuff to be saved. All you need to know is that Jesus Christ died for you. That the only way to God, to God's definition of immortality, is through Jesus Christ. He's the only way to the Father. And that's through the repenting of our sins, the acknowledgement of Jesus Christ as our Savior, that He shed His blood and washed our sins away, and that He is our mediator between us and our Creator, God, who is the Alpha and the Omega, who is that endless bicycle wheel circle, always turning and always turning, without any beginning and without any end, composed of the infinite wisdom that our human minds can never grasp. So why study the quantum mechanics and
Everybody seems to be holding their own
and
though.
artificial intelligence and the auto-encoding of AI? Why study any of this? Why is it even relevant to our salvation? I would agree with the pastor that it is not relevant to our salvation, except
There's the chest.
if we are putting our trust in those things of man. If we are putting our trust in our salvation,
I gotta do this
if we
manually.
are putting our trust in the immortality as defined by humans, as
You got enough
assembled
skills.
by humans, as put forth by humans, humans that are in a fallen state, who are not saved, humans that are not operating under salvation and the Holy Spirit, who are not operating according to the laws of God, who are counterfeiting the creation of God. The danger is putting our trust in the priesthood of science rather than in God and Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. Therefore, you need to know your enemy. The very first webinar Kathleen and I ever did was The Art of War by Sun Tzu and Full Spectrum Dominance. You need to know your enemy. You need to know the systems of your enemy. Now let me underscore this. The humans that are involved in this are not the enemy. It is Satan and his spiritual demons.
I think this
We
and
pray for
what
these
City of
humans
Ash
that
I
have
gotta
been
do.
misled, like Dr. Jordan
I fucking hate
does.
playing tanks.
We
Too many,
pray for them
too
as
much
humans,
button
just
mashing.
like we are humans. We do not stand in judgment of them. That is for God to do. We pray for their salvation of their souls. We pray that they will be turned 180 degrees away from Satan and come back to God. So this is not an attack, this is not a judgment against our fellow human beings This is an attack against the weaponry of Satan. This is knowing the weapons systems of your enemy. And by knowing it, you know how to defeat it. You can use it as evidence for the salvation of those that understand this language that we're presenting here today. When they understand what we are saying in science, to open their eyes to the malevolent side of science and be able to say, you have been deceived, you need to turn 180 degrees around and walk the opposite path leading to Jesus Christ and the salvation of your soul. If you fail to do that 180, then you are doomed to the judgment by God Almighty, your Creator. You are doomed. This is what motivates Kathleen and myself to continue this on and on and on and on with this stuff. Okay?
Watch like 30 fucking days respawn.
It is the evidence of evil that we are presenting for the salvation.
I'm not really worried about getting ancient if they're not
This is the evidence of evil.
Or like fucking 8 characters I gotta do it. Well, I know gotta, but probably will. Probably will do it on a few other characters tonight. I want to get back into PvP, but I'm getting absolutely, I'm getting decimated right now.
Understand the terminology and the concepts, and those outside of science who may not have the education in this specific area can see the dark side of what
am I doing?
That they have been deceived, that people are being fooled into trusting humanity rather than God. You talk about people that are blind. Now, in this image on the screen where they're talking about auto-encoding, every one of the people in that room are probably brilliant. I would venture to say they are. Massive IQs and PhDs and all the other good stuff to go along with it. I'll give them that. But they're blind. They're looking at the screen, and Jordy Rose is pointing to this.
Orb, dog, give me that orb.
In a neural network, which is what is illustrated there. This is the elements of the AI's brain. Okay? These are filters. These are filters by which information passes through from left to right. Okay? It is the filtering that then is able to sort out and make sense of the data that then allows the machine to apply automatically a label to the data so that it understands. That's the learning process. It's a system of filtering data in a recursive neural network system. Okay? So
what interests me about AI is the black box problem, or the black box phenomenon. I don't know if it's a problem, but essentially they don't know how neural networks come to their conclusion. They know the input and the output, but there's like a small point where they just don't know where the information's coming from. That's dangerous.
And this takes us full circle all the way around the bicycle wheel of the person.
They don't know how it comes to its answers sometimes. Well, all the time.
Numbers represent information.
Fucking weird.
This takes us all the way back to, does God want us to be studying this stuff? Or does he want us to trust his plan for us? Does he want us to know the numbers of particles in the universe? Does he want to know where the edge of the universe, the basketball, is? Does he want us to be focusing our time and energy and intellect and brilliancy that he's given us to counting the number of people that qualify as soldiers in the art of war? No. Because it results in our hubris.
Yeah, think of it. We're gonna make this a PvP. I have a PvP tankish healer. Like I have an old tank healer, but not like a tank. I don't have a PvP tank yet. I'll probably get on my old tank healer.
It results in our pride leading to our defeat, to our
Why are they
downfall.
fucking...
This is the blindness these people are operating under. They do not understand the consequences of their actions.
Oh, destroy the
They're not
orbs.
focusing their brilliance on God. Imagine if these brilliant people in this room had the leading of the Holy Spirit, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, to cause them
I should have a barrier on for this.
and read the Word of God. Suppose on that screen in this image, and Jordy Rose is pointing to all this about auto-encoding, and it's replaced with Scripture. What they could accomplish.
And PvP tanks are insane, bro. Like, they just cannot die. My alt tank healer, like I get practice incantation, like I get my ultimate heal like every fucking 10-15 seconds. Pretty much nothing can kill me unless someone pops corrosive and tons of dots.
You don't need particle colliders. You don't need
It's getting kind of weird over here.
Go to that image here real quick. That's a good segue. This is 8-letter DNA. This is what they are involved in.
Alright, there's the last one.
Trying to go to
Come here.
human bodies and change it. Is that not insane?
You're up.
That's not focusing on God. That's not trusting in God.
Fuck.
That's counting to the letter, to the letters of 8. Why? Why do that to God's creation? It's because you're not focused on God. You're not trusting in God. You're not trusting in His plan. You're not trusting in His creation.
Someone's gonna die, bro.
In His image.
Come here.
I'm going to cite the source. This is from nature.com, 21 February 2019. The title,
Fuck.
4 new DNA letters.
I got 4 on me, bro. Holy fuck.
Synthetic DNA seems to behave like the natural variety, suggesting that chemicals beyond nature's core.
Yeah, we're having a damage issue, bro.
Life on Earth. See, they take God out and replace it with the word nature. When we talk about synthetic life forms at Sanctuary,
Alright, we got 4, man. Come on.
They are not nuts and bolts robots they're building. It doesn't matter what the pictures are. They are building synthetic synthetic life forms. You cannot call it a life form if it is not based upon biology.
I really don't even know the basics of
Your synthetic
like an actual
biology
PvP tank that
illustrated
just
in January and
like
February
sits there and flags and shit.
magazine.
I just got the alt healer.
3D printing bioprinters, how they use their
Double
machinery
sword of
to
potentiates,
build
the
synthetic
dragon
DNA, thus
guard that
synthetic
makes
life
alt
forms that are grown.
cheaper, all kinds of shit. Okay, I got 4, bro. Come on, man.
To support
Oh my god. Now there's 5 Daedra. Yeah.
biologic DNA-based life forms at sanctuary.ai.
Alright, eliminate this
The
shit.
DNA of life
Just do it.
naturally stores its information in just 4 key chemicals: guanine, cytosine, adenine, and thymine, commonly referred to as GCAT respectively. Now scientists have doubled this number of life's building blocks, creating for the first time a
We got like 10 Daedra, bro. What the fuck?
language that seems to store and transcribe information just like natural DNA. In a study published on 22 February in Science, a consortium of researchers, and I won't list all the names, suggested an expanded genetic alphabet could, in theory, also support life. It's a real landmark.
Dude, execute this motherfucker. What are they doing?
Biologist at the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla, California. Let me stop there. Dr. Craig Venter, Institute
Oh,
of
man.
Longevity, also is in La Jolla, California. Okay? The study implies that there is nothing particularly quote, magic.
Yeah, I'm going through the roof now.
That evolved on Earth, says Rosenberg. That's a conceptual breakthrough, he adds. So he uses the word
Holy
magic
fuck.
and he uses the word evolve.
Okay, finished him. Did he just heal 13%? Oh my god, bro.
In a double helix, the chemicals on each strand pair up. A bonds to T and C bonds to G. For a long time, scientists have tried to add more pairs of these chemicals, also known as bases.
Y'all gotta get your damage up, bro.
Benner first created unnatural bases in the 1980s. Other groups have followed, with Rosenberg's lab making headlines in 2014 after
Oh my god, there's too many Daedra.
bases into a living cell.
Look at this shit, bro. What the fuck?
Complementary unnatural bases recognize and bind
They can't. I can't
and that the
fucking taunt all these.
they form holds its structure. Benner's team, which includes researchers in various U.S. companies and institutions, created
Oh my god.
lens by tweaking the molecular structure of the regular bases. The letters of DNA pair up because they form hydrogen.
Somebody like left or
bonds
something.
Hydrogen atoms, which are attracted to nitrogen or oxygen atoms in their partner. Benner explains that it's a bit like Lego bricks that snap together when the holes.
Okay, HM ain't happening, bro.
Now, I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I recommend that you type in 4 new DNA letters, double life. Nature article, 21 February 2019, and you go through that on your own. Suffice it to say, go on. Thank you, Kathleen. I can't pronounce things because I'm from California. Study Latin, or whatever it takes to pronounce these words that they use. Anyway, you get the drift, guys. Here we go. You check the. So, when we talk about these,
Oh my god, it's
these 4 letters of DNA that they're using in a double helix, recall my laborious discussions about third strand of DNA. Dormant nanoparticles of DNA in a third strand configuration.
Holy
That
fuck.
was built in silicon, in the computer, modeled and then 3D printed out. This all applies not just to you.
Are we really gonna have to
Third strand of
leave
DNA being activated
on
by a
fucking-
5G signal when a human being acknowledges
Where did dude go?
themselves taking
Why are we
the
missing
mark of the
one?
beast. That signal is then transmitted into the body, triggering the dormant nanoparticles to now begin to replicate the third strand of DNA. The relevancy is that this completely changes
Lagged
the
out.
human being into someone that is no longer recognized in the book of life, as it says in
IDK.
Scripture, God no longer recognizes those as having taken the mark of the beast, as found in the book of life. In other
Yeah,
words,
what up?
they are no longer his life form that he created in his image. They are now a life form of the enemy. There's only 2. There's a binary. There
Where'd he
is
fucking
God,
go?
and there is Satan. Okay? Now, the
Oh, I see.
Holy Trinity is encompassed in the side of God in the binary discussion. Okay? But if you are not in the book of life because your DNA has been changed because you took the mark of the beast, then you are with the enemy camp. You are no longer with God's camp. That is malevolency versus benevolency. Take your pick. This is why we study quantum
why.
physics, because quantum mechanics and quantum physics
Like
is
the orbs.
the hub of the spoke of the wheel. Let me go back to the very beginning.
This is fucking wild, bro. Yeah, that's that Nightblade.
Penny farthing.
That's that Siphon, bro.
Penny farthing bicycle.
Plus I got orbs on me.
This is based upon British coins. The large wheel is a penny. The small wheel is a farthing. You never knew this.
I don't know.
A penny farthing bicycle. This is the emblem of the television series The
The
Prisoner.
orbs.
If you look at the hub of this wheel, let's take the big wheel.
Alright, here's 2.
The hub of the penny with the spokes radiating out. The hub is quantum.
I'm watching Anthony
The
Patch
spokes
expose the
radiate
Jews.
out and show you
Expose Jew
by
tech.
division all of the
Jutech
different
2.0.
disciplines of science
Destroy
today,
the orbs,
physical
yo.
science,
Destroy the orbs.
okay? This is why we study quantum mechanics, because
Jutech.
it affects every scientific
Jewish
discipline
space lasers.
radiating out from it. When we
Alright, come on,
talk
son.
about DNA, when I cite this article where they are talking about manipulating at the molecular
It's the
level,
juice.
don't let that fool you.
Oh my
This
fucking
is a
nigger, go.
superficial article, despite
Oops.
the fact that it's in Nature. Okay? Despite the fact that they're citing, that this is some huge breakthrough, understand that even in Nature, they're only presenting the science, the superficial aspects of this science. Again, for the sake of the brevity of the article, I understand that. They're giving you the headlines. But what we do here in our conversations is dig down deeper below the headlines, below the sensationalism. Because
Alright, we're
it
good
is not
now.
the molecular level that they're operating at here. It is the quantum level in
We're good
which
now.
they are manipulating fundamental particles. They do this using what are known as hard X-rays.
Stream
Hard
safe,
X-rays result from the acceleration of quantum particles, protons, in a particle accelerator.
Oh my god, they're.
Circular pathway
Oh my god.
by bending magnets. And
Alright, we're at 5.
at right angles to this curved pathway of accelerated particles results synchrotron energies comprised of gamma rays and hard X-rays. Hard in the sense that they are extremely luminous, very powerful X-rays. Those X-rays are then used to examine DNA, to examine the proteins, to examine and understand.
Oh my
the
god,
molecular
bro.
codes
Come
of
on.
proteins, to then go down to the genome, to go down to
Bro.
the chromosome, to go down to the ribosomes, to the letters A, T, C, and G. And now
Bro, I got fucking 5 on me again, bro.
Letters.
Come on, please execute.
They use hard X-rays.
Oh my god.
Some quantum mechanics. Some
Execute this
quantum
motherfucker,
particle
please.
physics
Like, someone do 10k damage.
to manipulate
20k.
the fundamental quantum particles in DNA. They infer
God damn, I just killed him.
using hard
Oh my
X-rays.
god.
This is X-ray crystallography being employed to determine the structure.
God, that made my
of
dick
DNA
hurt.
and the RNA. The RNA is where the replication takes place. They manipulate.
What's he got on the screen? What the fuck, a bicycle? The prisoner.
in
What
order
the
to
fuck?
create new particles, new atoms. And when you create new atoms, you create new molecules. When you create new molecules, you're able to create synthesized DNA. Okay, so we drill down and then we come back up in our examination of the evidence. Okay? Let me read you the conclusion of this article. The researchers could potentially use their synthetic DNA to create novel proteins as well as RNA. Benner's team has also developed further pairs of new bases, opening up the possibility of creating DNA structures that contain 10 or even 12.
It's like Chinese water torture, man. What the fuck?
But the fact that the researchers have already expanded the genetic alphabet to 8 is in itself remarkable, says Rosenberg. It's already doubling what nature has. This is what
gotta make
they
some
will
coffee.
do with vaccines. This is what they will put into everything in our environment and changes. This is why it's relevant. This will be
This shit be
forced
driving
on
people
humanity.
nuts.
Do not believe this will solely be used in research to cure cancer or any of the other nonsense that they put out there. They always put the benevolent spin on it. You know that when you see the benevolent spin, you apply the 180 technique, seeing the game from 30,000 feet, you know that they're lying to you when they speak about the benevolent application of science. And 180 it and see that it is purely malevolent. Know them by their fruits. Why would you change 4-letter DNA that comes from God and add more letters to it? And don't tell me, any of you scientists out there listening, that it is benevolent, that we're going to cure cancer, because it is all being applied by humans that are in a fallen state, humans that are blind, humans that have been deceived, humans that believe that the dark origins of their science will somehow yield the positive fruit of curing all diseases. Because you know what is in that scenario? When they say in the benevolent presentations that they're going to cure cancer and Alzheimer's and everything else, because it's born out of quantum computing and using probability, that's good enough, as the scientists say. Using that's a good enough answer. That's what quantum scientists self-describe their mathematical processes in quantum computing. Using probabilities that are just good enough. They use that and apply it to DNA research and claim that they will solve all the problems using their good enough system of problem solving. They claim they will solve all the world's problems, including the human body's problems, and claim that it is benevolent. Because their end goal, as Ray Kurzweil says, we want to upload you into a machine. We want you to be as gods. We want you to achieve immortality. So I take you all the way around the bicycle wheel, around the
I should have a different race though.
Prisoner bicycle. And I
Say this to you. Define immortality,
Should be in dark elf.
Ray Kurzweil.
Is it
You of one of the 5 scientists
sort of
standing in front of me as the 5-year-old boy saying, okay, Ray, define your version of immortality for me. Well, his definition of it is a nightmare, because I don't want to be part of a machine. A machine that operates on probabilities. A machine that operates on that's just good enough. A machine that is trapped within the recursive nightmare of the infinity symbol of 8. That is trapped in the nightmare of the Hilbert space cube of infinity.
This should be a brand new
Believing
dark
that
elf,
it is
man.
greater
I got
than
no
God
sustain on
and
this
can
bit.
somehow break outside the cube in its definition of immortality, when in fact it recursively always ends up back at the crossover point, which is 0 in the balanced ternary of -1, 0, and +1, always resulting in 0. The 0 spiritually represents the lake of fire from the book of Revelation. The 0 is that version of immortality, which is the condemnation to hell itself. The definition of hell is the separation from God, the permanent separation of your soul from God. Being cast into the lake of fire is the 0, at the 0 point of the infinity symbol, which is the twisting of God's circle. The twisting that results in malevolency of technology. We do this for the salvation of souls, plain and simple. We join together in these conversations, you and I, in these live streams, to gather the evidence, to understand the evidence, and to make it relevant to our individual personal lives and then the lives of others. That's why we study this stuff, because we need to know the weapons of our enemy. The enemy are not the human scientists. The enemy is the spiritual that is profoundly influencing the humans into deceiving them into the destruction of their own race. We do not operate in a system of fear. We operate in a system of profound love for our fellow human being, manifesting in the reaching out to them for the salvation of their soul. The humans are not the enemy. Satan and his fallen angels are the enemy. Exactly the people that these deceived and blind scientists are in communication with. Okay? There was a lot more I was going to cover today, but we're at the end of 2 hours. I have a special announcement for Thursday. For the first time in our live streams, as patrons, I am bringing a guest in for an interview tomorrow. Now, many of you are familiar with her work from our live streams in the past that Kathleen and I have done, and also from the interviews that I've conducted in the past on the radio with her. But we are going to welcome back tomorrow our good friend Alana Freeland. We're going to talk about many of the subjects we are talking about today. So we are going to use today as a foundation to roll over into Thursday. Alana Freeland is writing yet another book. I think she's published 2. I may be wrong on that. But she is working on a 3rd book focused on synthetic biology. She and I trade information. We share information back and forth. And she has decided to focus on this discussion of synthetic biology. So you have the foundation for tomorrow, not only from today's presentation, but also the January and February.
Shit creepy as fuck. Did they patch it?
Oh, no, right. Not a buddy. Not a saw down 6-burr hang. Not a saw down 6-burr fielder. Ho, seniors, nothing. Ho, 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 never single 17th secondary. Ooh, 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 breeding you to cubic me to renders you in. Ooh, ooh, that, ooh,
Time to end this!
ooh, ooh, that, ooh, ooh,
Unfathomable! They've secured the point!
Quebec's blessing! We've taken the point!
You will take the most of the sun from his head.
It's pretty fun.
Stability we
Rally to the
won't
new
see
capture
two
point.
left in days. That
Fucking making AI sing, bro.
We've secured the point!
ooh, 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 none of your breathing is too jazzalo. 9 of your breathing is too jazzalo. You can say 9 and I'm 0.
Capture point.
9 and I'm 0. There,
Magnificent! We've seized the point.
there, 9 and I'm 0. There, none, 0.
With expressing, we've taken the point!
Ooh, whoa, 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 none, 0. None, 0.
None zero.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
We must capture the new point.
There,
Is he on, bro? He's fucked up.
there,
The point! We've captured it.
there, ooh, ooh, whoa, ooh, 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 ooh.
Why can't I interrupt him?
Ooh, fast and high. Then, when anyone wants you,
I pretty much can't die, bro. Like 80% of the time.
ooh, 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 zone ooh, ooh,
Rally to the new capture
Whoa.
point.
We've secured the point!
Are they all arcs?
On to the
What
new
the fuck?
point!
How the fuck I get immobilized?
They seized the point. They seized the point.
Yeah, these are PvE players. I probably would be getting smacked in some of these.
My mothers, we've taken the point.
Especially if I had a bad team.
The point. We've captured it.
To the new capture point!
What the fuck?
Whoa, Wembley, yo. Wenbue. Wenbue. Woo, 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 whoa, 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 whoa,
Magnificent!
whoa,
We've
whoa.
seized the
Someday
point.
says you and your guards. Dun, dun, dun.
Move on to the new point! Magra, squash them! They've taken the point! The point! We've captured it!
It's pretty fun. I just do this for points, man. It's kind of scummy, but
We've taken the point!
you get a lot of points. Like I'll usually be on top, be on top.
We must capture the new point. Move on to the new point.
I need a tripod.
Unfathomable! They've secured the point. Magnificent! We've seized the point.
To the new capture point!
Magnificent! We've seized the point. The point!
I got this. I got a vampire build.
Our triumph is
And
preordained!
I'm trying to make a wolf. What is it? Wolverine build? Wolverine. I'm fucking nuts. Werewolf. Fucking Wolverine. Wolverine build.
Make haste to the new capture point.
Get my sustain his butt.
Magnificent! We've seized the point.
Where Zorga's red Frostguard, use that. And immovability pots with restore magicka. Should be a tripod though.
By Muggles, we've taken the point. The point! We've captured it.
Jeez. And, like this guy just went 28 and 7. Holy fuck. Let's see what Whitney Webb is doing. Is she banned? I'm pretty sure she. Right. Whitney Webb breaks down fucking every single connection to Whitney Webb, to Epstein and shit. Like, holy fuck. Here's what they're really doing in Iran. I'm surprised she's even allowed on her.
She's one of the most fearless investigative journalists out there. Whitney Webb joins us to expose the tangled web of corruption that connects intelligence agencies, global elites, and tech oligarchs. She's dug deep into the Epstein files. She's followed the money, and she's connected the dots most journalists are too afraid or too compromised to touch. If you've ever wondered who's really pulling the strings behind closed doors, then stay tuned, because this is a conversation the powers that be don't want you to hear. Joining us now is one of the best journalists and researchers of our generation, the author of One Nation Under Blackmail, Whitney Webb. Whitney, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Kim. That's very flattering. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you are. You just, I mean, the truth is the truth, and Whitney, I speak the truth, and you are one of the best researchers and journalists of our generation, for sure.
Thanks.
Speaking of which, recently, Ian Carroll was on Joe Rogan, and he mentioned you, and this made a lot of,
big notice,
there was he talked about you. He then went to social media and talked about you, and you clarified some things that you felt like were not represented correctly in that obviously very widely seen interview on Joe Rogan, which I don't know why you haven't been on Joe Rogan, quite honestly.
I gotta do Sarah.
I have ideas.
Hey Joe, get Whitney on.
Yeah, Joe don't want her on,
if there's
bro.
somebody to be, what do you think?
Joe don't want her on.
You haven't been on?
Sure. Well, I know that he's quite cozy, really, to a lot of the big tech bros that have lined up in recent months with the current administration, and some of them I've been critical for a long time, sort of the Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, more broadly the PayPal mafia network, obviously very associated with the UFC network that's owned by Ari Emanuel, and some of those figures that I've been pretty critical of in the past.
Peter Thiel on?
I would assume it's sort of related to that, because a lot of the people that he's tended to have on, at least lately, tend to be pretty much across the board very supportive of PayPal mafia involvement, intimate involvement in government, and I am not. So I would assume it's somewhere along those lines, but I'm not necessarily involved in those decisions, and I don't know if I'd necessarily blame
Peter
Rogan
Thiel
personally either. He's
for
been
the reptile.
actually rather complimentary of my work and has mentioned it several times on his show, but ultimately very large podcasts like that have people that are involved with guest booking, for example, and may make decisions that Rogan isn't necessary, or turn down guests that Rogan might want to have on. I mean, who knows how those things really operate.
It might, I mean, the reality of it's probably not him making a lot of those decisions. He's probably very busy, and it's not that he's not the final line. I'm sure he is, but you can only control what your staff brings to you. I mean, you can't control what your staff brings to you, and you can only say yes or no to what they present in front of you. And so if there's gatekeepers, I mean, that's kind of like the White House chief of staff, right? The gatekeepers there.
Yeah.
And you're only presented with what you're presented with, and you get those options. And that's why it's really important to choose the right people who are around you to ensure that they're not going to gatekeep in a way that's...
I love respecting
sure.
But also when you're making hundreds of millions of dollars and you're parts of large platforms, you're going to have gatekeepers.
Well, I think even more than that too, a lot. I think it's been pretty clear with this administration and in last year's election that podcasts were really seen as a more important outlet for reaching the public than mainstream media, which I think is also pretty significant. So a lot of the biggest podcasts have definitely been arguably more influenced than others by that regard, and a lot of these bigger podcasts, Rogan included, having Trump on, having J.D. Vance on, and I've been, of course, very critical of J.D. Vance's longtime benefactor, I guess you could say, Peter Thiel, who's also been on the Rogan podcast. I don't, I think he, some people there would prefer I didn't really maybe discuss some of those ties because they do come up in my Epstein-related work.
Capture.
Yeah.
And some people, I guess in the case of, Ian perhaps has been pretty supportive of Musk and some of these figures in government, but also, does cite a lot of research for my book. So perhaps that was,
It's got to refresh.
a reasoning, but it's speculative. Again, I don't really
Right.
know, and I'm happy for him that he had a chance to do, a big interview on, the biggest podcast in the world, I guess. But as you noted, I did have some criticisms, but as it related specifically to my book in my work, because I felt like some of the things that were conveyed weren't necessarily
Someone got
100% accurate. And so because that's seen by so many people, and I'm not really doing that many interviews right now, and I'm not as active maybe as I used to be on social media and things like that, obviously people are going to develop conceptions and opinions about my work that are being given by someone other than me. And so I felt it was necessary to kind of clarify a few things.
And the thing that you wanted to clarify was that you've never made the claim that Epstein was Mossad.
Well, that was one of the two, I guess, main things that I wanted to clarify. So, yeah, essentially my book does argue for a significant tie of between Epstein and the state of Israel. But really, the claims that are detailed in my book argue for a tie between Epstein and really Israeli military intelligence, more specifically as it relates to like a formal Israeli intelligence agency. And Mossad isn't necessarily part of Israeli military intelligence, but is obviously part of the broader Israeli national security apparatus. And
What
so
is the name of the Israeli military intelligence arm?
Well, so there's a military directorate that controls all of the Israeli military intelligence agencies. That's called Amman, and that was basically run by Ehud Barak, a close Epstein associate, in the mid-1980s, at the time that Epstein was alleged to have been recruited into that network via, Robert Maxwell. Some of the claims for this come from former Israeli military intelligence operatives like Ari Ben Menashe, but also some other sources that have remained anonymous but are deemed to be credible, and some other things, that happened over the years. And obviously there was some sort of tie there, as Epstein was awaiting, for example, his sweetheart deal sentencing, in the 2007-ish period. He was in Israel, presumably considering not returning to the U.S. to face, whatever sentence he was going to be doled out. It was during the sentencing period, I believe. But according to, local reports and, Palm Beach newspapers, he was touring Israeli military bases, which is kind of unusual if you're just a reclusive billionaire,
right.
Accused of
why do you think,
sex crimes. You just
do you think it's true that Israel, bringing up the fact that he was thinking about not coming back, we've seen a lot of claims about Israel protecting pedophiles. Do you think that there's some truth to that?
Yeah, I do. But I there's a figure that I've sort of been writing about who's not necessarily a pedophile, but he's accused of rape, the film director Brett Ratner, who has some interesting ties to sort of the network behind Epstein and also to the Diddy cases. And a lot of organized crime ties that don't really seem to have been previously reported as it relates to Ratner. And Ratner was basically granted an Israeli passport a week after being Netanyahu's special guest at the UN alongside Alan Dershowitz. And he had previously, Ratner, done a major joint venture with this Australian billionaire named James Packer, who is one of the main figures in the Netanyahu corruption trial that's still ongoing for bribery and things like that. So there's a lot of strange things that sometimes happen in these power networks, and sometimes, and I'm aware of other cases as well that involve pedophiles specifically, where allegedly, they're granted the right to immigrate, and it's, all the circumstantial available evidence points to them evading charges in other countries and what have you, but that,
So as long as they're Jewish, though, just to be clear, they're not like bringing in a bunch of pedophiles, they're not like, any and all sex offenders and pedophiles.
No, Israel is Yeah, Israel's openly, at this point an ethno-state, so it's only for that specific demographic that benefits from those types of immigration policies there, sure.
And it's our greatest ally. I mean, what's so insane to me is that people, especially on the right, I mean, Israel's getting plenty of criticism on the right, which is really nice to see, but it's also getting a lot of protection from people on the right. And a lot of them are these, Christians or Catholics, and they claim that they care about kids, and their number one top priority is kids and the pedo circles that they want to crack down on. And yet they just seem to gloss over the fact that there's, that the Epstein operation clearly looked like a blackmail operation, and that they had no problem using underage kids in order to get that blackmail done. And the fact that Israel does seem to allow any sort of Jewish sexual offender or pedophile to run off and escape without being extradited back to wherever they committed the crime. I mean, how can people defend this? I just don't understand the defense. I understand Congress and them being bought off, right? I understand the big money interests. I don't understand the average commentator and why unless they're also being paid too, which is very possible.
Well, I think these days a lot of influencers are being paid, and there are, scandals that have sort of, mini scandals, I guess, that have sort of come out to that effect. But, as it relates to just the Epstein scandal alone, depending on what side of the political divide you fall on and how easily manipulated you are, like what influencers or podcasters or whatever that you follow, there's efforts to link Epstein to certain names specifically. So in the right, a lot of people tend to look at Epstein as, Epstein and Bill Clinton, Epstein and Kevin Spacey, Epstein, and just specific names. And then, of course, on the left will be a more focus on Epstein and Donald Trump and figures that are more, hated by that particular political demographic right now. And there's consistently been an effort to sort of focus on the salacious material of Epstein, the celebrity aspect, his ties to famous people, or his ties to politicians of one particular divide, so that depending on who you're listening to can create an echo chamber, and people, on the right in particular, may not necessarily, connect Epstein's activities to,
a blackmail
Israel.
operation for the state of Israel. Right.
Sure.
Rather than just it being, it was a bunch of rich people who are sick. I mean, you make a good point. That's kind of what everybody's not everybody, but there's a lot of people that are kind of just reducing it to that. And
Sure.
It's like, no, this thing was way bigger than that. This is an assault on all of us, on every single American, is what that was. And Europe as well. They collected a lot of blackmail on Europeans also. Not just the United
well,
States.
I mean, it's a global thing, and it's been going on for a very long time. But I do want to go back to why I chose to clarify this in particular on Twitter, because as we've just talked about, I do absolutely think there was an Israeli state connection in some capacity, even if not Epstein being directly affiliated with, Mossad as an agency. But I do, basically what the thesis of my book is something much broader than that. I basically argue that Epstein was part of this transnational network that's also really transgenerational, that was created through basically this fusion of organized crime interests and intelligence agencies going back to the 1940s. And this, of course, would predate the existence of the state of Israel, which wasn't created until 1948. And these networks had already essentially come together by that point in time. And, I essentially argue that there's a significant amount of CIA ties, U.S. intelligence ties as well in this network, and that, they're transnational in scope. And a lot of the organized crime network that's affiliated with this spans, has a lot of interests in both the U.S. and Israel, but also, has expanded through partnerships, for example, between people like Robert Maxwell and Simeon Mogilevich to Eastern Europe, Russia, and beyond. And I think a lot of the stuff, for example, that sort of percolated up what was true about the stuff people were trying to go after Trump for in Russiagate, there's really more related to this specific organized crime network, but you can't go deep enough to prosecute anything without coming up with ties to powerful people in Israel and also the U.S. And it's ultimately, affects, at least as it relates to the U.S., both parties very significantly. Yeah. And I talked a lot about in my book about this particular network of oligarchs based in the U.S., that have been referred to by the Wall Street Journal as either the study group and the mega group, and how they seem to have a lot of influence over what Epstein was doing, and also, you know, the governments of both countries, and pretty much most of the known members or earliest members of that group, including, you know, Leslie Wexner and Charles and Edgar Bronfman, have historic, if not continuing, ties to organized crime. So I basically make a much bigger case than saying Epstein was Mossad, for example. I think just saying Epstein was Israel is kind of reductive, because in trying to, if you really are interested in sort of informing people and with the intent of undoing this power structure's control over society, you have to understand that it's much bigger than any one nation state. And I think also, just like people trying to say Epstein was CIA, or for example, without mentioning Israel, it can be kind of myopic. You're absolving one of the other intelligence factions that was absolutely involved in sort of taking people away from the fact that the power of these networks is transnational. It's not exclusive to a single nation state. And I think, you know, those are ultimately important points. And what the evidence shows about Epstein is that he's tied to this particular network that knits together organized crime like oligarchs with intelligence agencies, and the influence that those networks have had, you know, not just on Epstein's own network, but how Epstein, you know, is basically middle management or a force for that broader network, and how he's making ties, for example, with every single major big tech CEO of importance. Obviously, Bill Gates got a lot of the focus, but, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, all of these people had some connection with Epstein.
But I mean, we do have to start somewhere with it. I understand what you're saying, that this is a collaboration from, there's a lot of different powerful people with a lot of different powerful interests, and it spans the entire globe. And so it's not just, you can't just reduce it to Israel's influence on all of this. I mean, Israel can only have so much influence, so as long as, I mean, you can only blackmail people so much. A lot of it has to be them wanting to be a part of whatever it is you're doing, because they've got their own agenda, their own interests in whatever it is that they're, you know, if you're an oligarch and you're going to make a bunch of money, you don't need to be blackmailed, right? I mean, you could just be in, I mean, of course, blackmail helps to keep you, to make sure that you're on the hook, but it's certainly, if you have your own interests, then it's even better, because you're motivated. And so I see what you're saying, that this is like larger than just one intel agency or one nation. But I think the thing that makes it most offensive about Israel, because I do think we have to crack down on all of the influence, the oligarchy, the power structures that are everywhere. And I understand that. They're harder to but they're harder to pinpoint and suss out when they're not as, you know, a country is easy to say, all right, a country has been controlling, and a country has been blackmailing.
But who controls the country, right?
Yeah, but I think what makes it the most offensive, what makes Israel more offensive, just blatantly, is the fact that what they're getting at. I mean, it's one thing for like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Peter Thiel, like here in the United, these are Americans. I think they're all Americans, right? Have they all gotten American citizenship? I think.
Well, at this point, they have American citizenship.
Yeah,
not all of them are, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they're Americans who, you know, they're siphoning perhaps the world or the American people for resources to an American company. I think and for their own, you know, their own control and their own money. And I think we can all say, yeah, we want to crack down on that because we don't want to be controlled or surveilled or have this kind of thing over us. But I think it's less offensive than a foreign country controlling us. And not only that, not only are they siphoning resources from us, but they're waging war. I mean, we're going to war on behalf of them. We're killing kids on behalf of them. And that is, I think, extra perilous, that causes us to focus more on Israel. And it's like, if we could just...
DC coping.
I kind of wonder if we just rooted that out, and if we expose the fact that they've been able to blackmail our nation and our politicians and everybody, then we could at least start there and say, all right, let's start with the foreign country that's causing us to kill kids. And then from there, once we unravel that, then we can say, oh yeah, now all these players are also connected to all of these other things that we have to unravel.
Sure, but unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than that. I'll give you an example. So, like Leslie Wexner's philanthropy at a time when his tax attorney was shot in the face and it was deemed linked to organized crime, and Leslie Wexner was tied to organized crime by Columbus. Ohio reports he, is creating the Wexner Foundation, and one of the main focuses of that was not just training up Jewish American leaders in the United States, but also, people that would later go and serve in the government of Israel, and greatly influencing them through, the Wexner Foundation's Israel Fellowship and things like that, and later teaming up, for example, that kind of same line of the Wexner Foundation with the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program and things like that. So a lot of times these oligarchs can have a very outsized influence, and in the case of Israel, you have a lot of ostensibly American billionaires buying off Israeli politicians. And so there tends to be a lot of, transnational stuff going on, because what happens when you have someone like Sheldon Adelson, who was the biggest Republican donor and biggest donor to Trump during Trump's first administration. He's ostensibly the biggest donor in American politics at that point of time, but he's also on video saying that all he cares about is being a good citizen of Israel and that his children serve later in the IDF. Ultimately you can pinpoint perhaps, some of this coming from the intelligence, apparatus of Israel, but when you also have political power and politicians being essentially dominated by money flows, by billionaires financing both countries, because Adelson also, couldn't directly donate to Netanyahu, but bought entire newspapers to promote him in Israel domestically, basically de facto donating to him. There's a lot of influence there, and, an American billionaire, Ronald Lauder, is directly responsible for Netanyahu becoming prime minister at all in the late 90s. So there's a lot of, I think, importance in looking at this particular transnational group and their influence, because a lot of them are very supportive of the ethno-supremacist paradigm that is typified by the current administration of Israel that Netanyahu leads, and obviously has been kind of a force in Israel for some time, but I think it's, they're very active in promoting that ideology, and they're big funders to organizations like the ADL, for example, that train the FBI in what constitutes a hate crime or hate speech. And now that you're having, for example, the current administration move to criminalize certain types of hate speech, targeting a specific group, and the ADL also has ties to, the state of Israel as well as this transnational organization, it becomes very problematic for both countries. So I don't know. I think it is a lot more complicated than just trying to blame one nation state, because, you can try and go after Israel for that, but you're not going to be able to unless you realize that a lot of the power structure that enables that activity in Israel, has a lot of antecedents with, entities or people based in the United States.
That's where it gets really tricky, because there's so many, and that's like the problem with AIPAC, right? Is that their excuse is, well, we're Americans, so we're allowed to donate to the political, and just like Sheldon Adelson saying that he's like a devout Israeli, but he's an American, and so was an American, so he was allowed to donate to our political system.
Yeah.
And that's, so that makes it quite complicated.
Well, I mean, if you look at, history too of some of the most scandalous CIA operations of the last several decades, a lot of them were done jointly with Israeli intelligence. And so if you are interested, for example, in tackling the quote unquote national security deep state of the United States, it is completely tied up with the intelligence agencies of Israel at this point, to the point that, I've been arguing in some of the work I've done for probably over almost a decade now, that really the U.S. has a binational security state. And then again, the military and intelligence apparatus's dependence on a lot of, Israeli intelligence cutouts, arguably, and cybersecurity a critical infrastructure and other things. It means that you can't really talk about separating the ties of the U.S. from its ostensible greatest ally without looking at those points. And so there's been a major effort to try and kind of prevent that separation from really even being possible, but a lot of it is made possible by these moneyed interests that greatly influence both countries. But again, it's broader than the U.S. and Israel, but you can see it very significantly by looking at the oligarch networks of those two countries in particular.
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of national security, but at this point, because they've infiltrated our national security so deeply, like you've mentioned, that it's like, how do you unravel the two? But that's why they keep saying they're our greatest ally, and the rest of us are like, why exactly? I mean, what exactly have they ever done?
But our national security apparatus, I would argue, was compromised before Israel was even created by these organized crime interests, which was really a specific faction of organized crime that grew out of what was referred to once as the National Crime Syndicate, which was really a meeting of the Jewish mob and the Italian mafia, Mayor Lansky and Charles Luciano. Before that, organized crime in the U.S. had sort of been separated in ethnic silos, right? So there's the Irish mob, there's the Jewish mob, there's, it's by nationality or ethnicity, and they sort of broke that model down and became infinitely more successful than everyone else. But you could argue also that after Luciano was, deported to Europe and all of this, that really the Lansky syndicate ended up taking all
being
the
more in
chips.
control.
So
do you think that's what happened to JFK? I mean, do you think that the reason why he was killed was Israel or Jewish lobby or mafia, the Jewish mob and the Italian mob?
So I'm not an expert on the Kennedy assassination, because it's one of those things that you have to spend years, I think, becoming an expert in the topic to really pontificate about it.
Yeah.
But I have obviously brushed up against various entities that have been blamed by other researchers who have taken that time for having at least some significant role in the Kennedy assassination. And ultimately, I think it's the same network that I argue was behind Epstein, which is a meeting of U.S. intelligence interests and Israeli or Zionist intelligence interests in organized crime. But if you see that in World War II, the U.S. intelligence apparatus formerly teamed up with the specific organized crime network, and then that organized crime network armed the Haganah, the precursor to the IDF, and then a lot of these organized crime like billionaire families that are still prominent, like the Bronfmans, furnished Israel's early national security state with what would now in today's money be billions of dollars in weapons. It kind of starts to make more sense of how we ended up here, so to speak. So if our interest is really to interrogate power here and where a lot of what we're observing today, where did it come from, we have to understand the history and realize that this is basically something much bigger than any one nation state. And in order to sort of understand how we can extricate ourselves from it, we have to have a pretty good idea of what this power structure ultimately is.
How do you not just get I listen to you and I just think, I give up. I mean, there's no way we're never gonna take it back. We're never gonna unravel this. It's too powerful. Just live a nice life, go garden, and give up. I mean, how do you...
Well, I think you can live a nice life and garden and also not give up, which is what I attempt to do. I mean, basically, at the end of the day, these entities and this power structure have been successful because people have not really been aware of what's been going on and how interconnected a lot of these oligarch networks ultimately are, and how connected they are to our national security state. Because a lot of people, if we're just talking about back to my point earlier, talking about Mossad, talking about the CIA. Who does the CIA work for? Who does Mossad work for? In the case of the CIA, it's very clear that it was created by Wall Street bankers who entered into questionable alliances with organized crime, and bankers and organized crime are both ultimately interested in expanding their rackets and is making as much money as possible. And so eventually you have certain economic networks you know, these alliances dominated what is now corporate America, the multinational corporation. That's who the CIA has, throughout most of its history, conducted coups on behalf of. So we have to go a level up if we really want to know what's going on, and look beyond CIA and Mossad and see, you know, who's really, at least at the scale up, a key part of the power structure that's really running the show, because, you know, it's important for them that the public doesn't really look that high up, because then it just seems like we can't really do anything about it, but I think people ultimately can. And, you know, what I've argued a lot for a long time is that, you know, people need to try and extricate themselves, you know, from, you know, the biggest iteration of what this mob is today, which is really big tech, which is, again, a lot of these CEOs connected to figures like Epstein or other questionable associations, and also almost all of the big Silicon Valley companies today have origins or funding tied to the CIA or to DARPA or to entities like that, and that we should boycott them as much as possible and not use their services as much as possible and not be dependent on these entities, because if we're dependent, then, you know, they can do whatever they want to us.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the best way to not give up is to work to be as independent of those systems as possible. Because if we're dependent on them, you know, you're basically a slave to these people at the end of the day, which is what I think most Americans do not want. But I think there's a lot of efforts being made to sort of keep people in the box of where they think, oh, well, if I vote for this party or this politician and this candidate, I don't have to do anything to ensure my independence from the system. I can remain dependent on the system and hope that politician XYZ will magically, you know, save the day and fix the country and, you know, ends this ruling power of 80 plus years of, you know, intelligence and organized crime. Yeah, I think it's really something that has to be sort of done on an individual level, and people need to take individual responsibility if they don't want to be part of the system, particularly as we move into this increasingly digital future that these very small handful of companies are going to completely control. Which kind of brings me to my other criticism in the aforementioned tweet about you know, claims that were made about my work. So Ian in that interview described some of my work on big tech CEOs, namely Peter Thiel. He used the word unhinged. He later said that he didn't mean to use that word and should have used a different word. But in the context of saying that, also said that my historical facing work, like on Epstein's history, was valuable. But basically, you know, more or less implied that my work on current figures is not. But actually, my work on Peter Thiel is intimately connected to my work on Epstein, and in my book, One Nation Under Blackmail, I basically conclude with the point that someone like Epstein is no longer really relevant for intelligence services or organized crime networks or oligarch networks in the age of technology. And why is that? So back in the day, you have Epstein and a litany of other figures like him, which I detail figures in my book. He was obviously not an anomaly at all. But that type of sexual blackmail operation comes with a lot of risk. It takes a lot of money to finance, you know, the person who's running it, their mansion, their parties, paying off women, all of these money flows. It can be risky, and it certainly ended up being that in the Epstein case, right? Because he was discovered, arrested twice, and it obviously took a lot of money to cover things up, at least the first time and arguably the second time as well, where he ended up dead. So what's a better alternative? Well, if you have everyone onboarded onto digital systems that you control, like the CIA being at the origins of Google, DARPA being at the origins of Facebook, the CIA being at the origins of Oracle, and a lot of these other entities, Bill Gates and Microsoft having ties to the Maxwell family as early as the late 90s and things like that. And obviously Gates and Epstein, you know, what does that ultimately mean, like, I think, at this point in time, we've learned through either whistleblowers or other means that intelligence agencies access or can access pretty much any part of our digital footprint, no matter how secure we tend to think it is. And that's like with revelations about, ostensibly secure messaging apps like Signal being compromised or having had some sort of military funding in its origins or what have you. It's much easier to suck up all of Americans' communications without a warrant, and that necessarily is in the hands of a lot of these same agencies with dubious track records that have engaged in blackmail in the past, like the CIA, for example. And so, with that kind of technology, you don't really need someone like Epstein anymore. Someone like Epstein becomes expendable because you can use technology for that. And I argue in the book that Peter Thiel's Palantir was basically a repurposing of this DARPA program called Total Information Awareness that was developed by the Iran-Contra criminal who was exonerated by William Barr when he covered Iran-Contra and other notable scandals of the era up in the first Bush administration. Poindexter's considered the father of modern surveillance, and it was basically, he was running this Total Information Awareness program. Peter Thiel and Alex Karp came to him, being connected through Richard Pearl, who has long-standing ties to the state of Israel and also the U.S. neoconservative movement, and also Netanyahu. Basically, bringing those together, looking for a way to privatize Total Information Awareness after it came under congressional scrutiny and was ultimately defunded by Congress because of private outrage that it would eliminate the constitutional right to privacy for all Americans, which is absolutely true. But the outrage disappeared when it was entirely a private company, and Palantir was incubated by the CIA. The CIA was its first customer for its several years. It was a client, and now it's a key part of, IDF AI mass slaughter in Gaza. And has been a key part of the U.S.-Israel relationship since then. But more specifically, domestically in the U.S., it is the engine on which the warrantless mass surveillance runs. It collects everything about everyone and makes it disposable to intelligence agencies. And it's very easy to find blackmail on people with an entity like Palantir being so widely used. And
that to me is really scary. The fact that, with the internet, and everybody's on the internet, and also people can plant stuff on your devices. They can.
Another great point. It's true.
So we're all blackmailable, unfortunately, at this point.
The digital era has certainly changed things, and I think that's why it's very interesting that you have sort of Epstein, after his first arrest, pivot so much towards Silicon Valley and these, major Silicon Valley CEOs whose companies were built up with national security state involvement. You have someone like Epstein who was tied not just to sex blackmail, but arms trafficking and money laundering for intelligence, being involved with these people to a significant degree. Some of these big tech CEOs like Sergey Brin and even Elon Musk were subpoenaed or attempted to be subpoenaed as part of the USVI JP Morgan case, for example, that was settled to keep the trial from happening, to keep all of that evidence out of court, arguably. But it's very problematic. And by the way, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, the reason Jamie Dimon is CEO of JP Morgan is because of two of these mega group billionaires, the Crown family and Leslie Wexner, because they installed him as head of this Bank One, that later merged with JP Morgan, and after the merger happened, Dimon's in charge of JP Morgan. So it really shouldn't be any surprise that Epstein did so much banking for his, trafficking operations with JP Morgan in particular. But again, not a lot of interest in looking at that, but a lot of these entities have so much influence over so many industries. And so, again, I think just focusing on specific intelligence agencies, it's important to understand that there's a lot more going on than just that. And ultimately, those spy agencies are working for somebody and are controlled by some buddies, right?
Yeah, I give up. I'm just going to go start gardening. I don't know. It's just that the web of it is, well, you know, and you bring up a great point when it comes to tech, and I don't know how anybody could ever call you unhinged, quite honestly, or any of your takes unhinged. I mean, you're so well researched and you're putting everything together so well. And, you know, I understand that people don't want to look at somebody like Elon Musk and think, oh, this guy has, because he just seems so innocent in the way he talks and the way he is, and I think that's true.
Well, he's the richest man in the world, and I'm
Right.
sure the richest man in the world can afford people that, you know, help brand him online and
Right.
tell him what to wear and how to style his hair and what memes to post and all sorts of things to reach out to the common man. But yeah, I think there hasn't been a lot of interest in a lot of prominent media figures and really looking at really any of the PayPal mafia types, namely Musk and Peter Thiel, who in the
Yeah.
context of this administration are highly significant figures.
Yeah, I don't think people really want to pay much attention to the PayPal mafia because they like everybody in the PayPal mafia mostly. Like there's a lot of personality there that people follow and like, and they think that they're going to come in and save the country, and they're using a lot of that language.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways they are, because you always want to throw like something good at the people in order to get them on your side, and then you're doing some other things that maybe the people wouldn't agree with, but you just don't talk about it and you hide it, right? Like all the surveillance stuff, the tech stuff, the fact that the military-industrial complex has moved mostly into the tech sector, and so now
Well,
the big
Silicon Valley
military-industrial-
and national security are absolutely fused. You can't tell where one
Yeah.
ends and one begins anymore. It is absolutely a public-private partnership. 100%. But I think people got outraged, especially during the COVID era, at the public side of the public-private partnership, that now the focus of which side of that is meant to build trust with the public has shifted to the private sector.
Yeah.
We can trust the private sector because the public sector failed us during COVID and during all of these things. Look how corrupt the public sector is. Not denying that there's a lot of corruption in the public sector, but that doesn't mean that
We
there
can
isn't
suddenly trust the
corruption in
private,
the
right,
private
yeah.
sector
Right.
as well, or that a lot of these private sector entities, like I mentioned earlier with a lot of these big tech firms, would not exist if it was not for the public sector and the national security apparatus that created them.
That's what makes me not trust Elon, is the fact that he has all those government contracts, and
He has a lot.
Yeah, so it's like he's still, even if, like, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say the guy is genuinely a good guy, nice guy. He really does want the best for everybody, but he's still, he's an ideologue on one thing, and that is colonizing Mars, right? We know that is the one thing he wants, for whatever reason, he wants to really do that project. It's like a pet project of his. And it's when you get into those pet projects, like Bill Gates, who I think had the pet project of, I want to be known as saving the world, you know, rather than just the Microsoft guy. And so he goes into the health sector and he starts doing the vaccine stuff. And I think a lot of these stem from a personal drive, a personal desire. And then, of course, because these are so big and they become so unmanageable, there's a lot of other entities that get involved. But I think, you know, if you're Elon Musk and the one thing, your one pet project is Mars, you don't want to piss off the government, because the government won't let you send rockets up into space anymore. I mean, they could tell you, we're not going to let you do that. And if you want the ability, and you want the contracts, and you want all of this stuff, and because you're going to need the funding in order to build a colony on Mars, right? You've got to be pretty rich. So you have to have all of that. I think people underestimate how willing people are to compromise in order to achieve their own personal pet desire or their own, you know, what they believe. And we see that even like with the Zionists, for example, Christian Zionists, who many of them are not bought off by Israel at all. They don't need to be. They were inadvertently, without them realizing it. Their churches were infused with a lot of money. Churches run on donation. A lot of donation was pumped in by Zionists that then told the preachers, go and preach Zionism basically to all of your people and get them to believe. And then they became believers, and then it's like they just genuinely believe it. It's in their soul. Like, I kind of wonder if Mike Huckabee's that way. You know, he's just so pro-Israel that I'm like, is this really, are you bought off, or is it just a zealotness from your religion? And I think it might be more of the zealous. He's just a zealot. So I think Elon is like a zealot for Mars. And when you have that kind of zealousness, you're willing to compromise in order to achieve your ultimate big goal.
Yeah, well, arguably one of the reasons that Musk is so interested in Mars, and he said this on Twitter, is because he wishes to impose he wants to create the Mars technocracy. which is significant because technocracy is a model of government that arguably is being rolled out on sort of a global scale here on Earth right now. And notably, Elon Musk's grandfather was the head of the technocratic movement when it existed, several decades ago in Canada, and has been pretty vocal that he supports the technocratic model. Just in general, which is kind of problematic because ultimately technocracy is about rule of society by a scientific elite that ultimately, in terms of its philosophy, view the masses basically as programmable automatons that don't really have free will and are sort of not really that different from animals.
I could see Elon going in that direction. I could see him the way he pumps out babies and without thinking that, being a father and being actually there matters. The way that he views human beings seems to be along those lines.
A lot of these types of figures certainly view their own genetic stock in a different category as the masses, right? And I think that's.
But he clearly just views people as. It's like not human, the way he views human beings, even the way he just makes his own children through IVF surrogacy, pumping them out with various different, even just that mentality is clearly the humanness of humans is not there.
I'm not super familiar with, his relationship with his own kids, but I am more or less familiar with some of the other ambitions,
literally.
I'm more, okay, well, I'm more I've been more focused on some of his, for example, his ties to, I guess, the Maxwell family or Epstein world, which tend to go underreported. And of course, he will publicly posture like he had literally no affiliation at all with them. And I think that is definitely less than honest, and have said this in detail why. In the past, and also on some of his, obviously his military contracts, which are pretty significant, but some of his other ambitions as well. For example, for Twitter, openly wanting to turn it into something like WeChat, which has been criticized in the past by people on the right, which now very openly support Musk. For being for being an Orwellian system. It's basically a public-private partnership with the state for policing speech, among other things, and for mass surveillance. And it's very likely that Twitter is, moving along those same lines in the idea of sort of having it be a one-stop shop for all your finances, which is what WeChat kind of is in China, would give Elon Musk a lot of power, because ultimately, if we're in the age where data is the new oil, instead of having oil barons like we had, back in the 19th century, now we're basically having data barons. And so who runs the infrastructure, who runs the apps, all of that. Musk is poised to be one of the biggest data barons of our age. And what type of power comes with that? Well, it comes with the power to essentially remake society however you want. And so his interest in technocracy, which is also shared by some of these other likely data barons of the future, like Mark Andreessen, for example, among others, should, I think, be scrutinized. And if this is the type of society we want, where we're basically going to be ruled by algorithms that are not human, and only certain people maintain those algorithms. So perhaps, it would be framed as, a more egalitarian society, and that all of society would be governed by the algorithms. But that isn't necessarily true, because you obviously are going to have an upper class that programs and maintains the algorithms and decides what their parameters are and what they do. And this is basically outlined in this book by the former Google CEO Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger, that this will inevitably happen when AI takes over government. And you could argue that a lot of the efforts being made by Doge, and I'm not going to say that I'm not defending the stuff they've been ostensibly exposing, because obviously there is a lot of corruption and pork. Like, just like there's pork in the spending bills, obviously there was plenty of that in in the public sector, and I don't really think it should be that surprising. But the question is, what changes is that used to justify? And pretty much across the board, it's putting AI in greater control of government. So if it's your AI, for example, in the case of Elon Musk Grok, right, or if it's OpenAI in the case of Sam Altman, and your algorithm has replaced the jobs of 20,000 people, then you have arguably the influence that those 20,000 workers had on the organization that's employing you, or now your algorithm. So, there's a lot of things to be discussed here. And even if people like Elon, it's very complicated to argue that you're furthering the cause of liberty and freedom and all of that when you're centralizing power to such a significant degree and cheerleading that on. And also a lot of policies that Elon Musk has long championed, the right doesn't like carbon pricing, carbon taxes, things like that. Actually a lot of public policies that Musk has long supported are policies that have long been supported by entities like the World Economic Forum. But now, it has a very different sales pitch behind it. A lot of these policies are being framed as libertarian, but there's a lot more. I think people should look less at the sales pitch and more on what these policies functionally mean. So as an example, you have the political philosopher who's like the supposed house philosopher of the PayPal mafia, Curtis Yarvin. And Curtis Yarvin has a quote that could have come from Klaus Schwab or Yuval Noah Harari about how the masses need to be dealt with, and that it's a humane alternative to genocide to have people in pods plugged into a virtual world to entertain them and basically be like waxed like bees in a beehive, and basically being plugged into the metaverse or something. I mean, how is that really functionally different? I guess in Yarvin's argument, he would say, well, it would be, a corporation or a gov corp, a governing corporation or a public-private partnership, I guess, that would, put you in a pod and control the metaverse, but isn't really that functionally different. And, if people can be convinced to buy, Teslas after that was the liberal car, on the right, just to own the libs. I mean, I think it wouldn't be that hard to make a sizable demographic exist that would get Neuralink in a few years just to own the libs and things like that. It's kind of a slippery slope, and I think people sometimes are naive about how easily we can be manipulated, oftentimes through the engineering and manufacture of celebrities that are pushed in front of us. And the way that algorithms can do that now is extreme. Because they've harvested so much data about us, they have profiled us so extensively, they know exactly what to show you to get you to be persuaded about certain things, depending on what demographic you're in.
We are definitely easy to manipulate and guide in the direction that they want us to be guided in. I mean, it's all very dystopian, Whitney, and I mean, you are a wealth of information. I really appreciate you being on and